Hi everyone, Mrs. Kane here. So I'm going to give you a really quick overview of what we talked about today on our 4th and 5th grade art enrichment club class. So I'm going to share here with you. The first thing that we talked about was last week we did a portrait. We did a portrait of an animal, and in the past we've talked about self-portraits, which is a picture of yourself as well. And so what we thought would be interesting today is to take this club into a different direction and create what's called a landscape. A landscape is a picture of a scene outside, so something outside. So I had a student that mentioned today landscaping. They thought of their landscaping, which guided them to the understanding of what a landscape picture is. It's a picture of a scene from outside. We are going to do this under a style of art called Impressionism. We're actually going to make ours a little bit more abstract than most of the Impressionist artists who fall under this style, but I wanted to highlight a specific artist and some of the qualities he uses in his art while creating this landscape. So Impressionism is an impression of something from real life. So a landscape is a perfect thing to be drawing when you're creating something under the idea of Impressionism. But when you're creating it, you're using exaggerated marks and lines or brush strokes. Okay, many of the artists, when Impressionism became popular, were creating paintings. Today we're not going to be painting, so we're using a different form of exaggerated marks. We looked at the artist Vincent van Gogh. We looked at his portrait last week, and notice all of these large swirling lines and brush strokes. Even on his skin texture, his beard, his hair, everything has very exaggerated lines. Many of you have seen his painting, his very famous painting, Starry Night. What I pointed out to students with this picture is that look at how the bottom of the picture almost is stepped, right? It starts and continues to build up as the picture goes. So it starts small and then continues to build up into the sky. So you have on the bottom all of the houses in the town, and then you start gradually working into some forestry and trees here. Then you have a larger hill in the background, and then even a larger mountain behind that. So you can see it starts to step as you go further into the landscape. And then you end in the sky with the beautiful swirling style that he created his sky in. We are going to create a more abstracted version of a landscape picture using these very exaggerated lines and marks, focusing on the repetition of different lines, creating pattern, which we've been talking about at school quite often. Also, for 4th and 5th grade in this project, we focused on starting to do some perspective, which is drawing something in 3D. We started working on some perspective techniques to create our house in 3D. Now, this is not extremely technical. When we do perspective in class, we'll get much more technical. This is more of a forced perspective where we're just getting the basic ideas and making the house look like it's in 3D, but it's not measured and completely technical at this point. So you can choose to start with a pencil if you prefer, or you could go ahead right off the bat and start with a black marker, crayon, or colored pencil. If you are going to add any paint to this, do not use a Crayola marker because it will bleed the color when you go to paint. But notice everything, all the different sections are outlined in black, okay? So the first thing that we did was we drew our house. We started about halfway up the paper, not too low, not too high. And I'm working with a smaller piece of paper. Obviously, everybody's drawing will be different depending on what paper you're using at home. So I'm going to start by making a square with, and I'm drawing upside down, so my lines might not be totally spot on, okay? I am starting with a square with no top, and we've talked about in class that when you draw the roof on a house, you have it overhang a little bit. In real life, here would be gutters to collect all the rainwater. okay? And then I'm going to make a triangle. So this looks basically like an arrow at this point. Now from this point, and this point, we want to create those on an angle so it looks like that portion of the house is going back into the landscape. The important thing to remember when you're doing this is to keep all of the diagonals the same. So keep them going in the same direction. If you were to make this diagonal like that, your house isn't going to look like a forced troop, like a perspective. Okay, so try to keep all the diagonals going at the same angle. Okay, on the side of the house here, when we make any vertical lines, and this is true of creating perspectives, you want them to be a true vertical, so straight up and down. A vertical line goes up and down. Anything that would be vertical on your own home, any walls or windows or doors, are going to be drawn straight up and down, even though we're showing the wall on an angle. So all the verticals go up and down. The angle on this roof is going to be repeated back here, keeping again that same angle, okay? And I made my roof overhang quite a bit back here, so I'm going to just extend this over a little bit so it's not quite such an overhang. Okay, then and I'll go ahead and quickly outline mine. You can finish your whole house before you outline, whatever you are more comfortable with. And I'm working fast so that our video is not too long, and feel free to pause or whatever you need to do throughout the video when you need more time. Okay, now on the side of the house, I'm going to create a door and some windows for the front door. The verticals of the door are going to remain straight up and down, but the top of the doorway is going to continue with that same angle. So this same angle here you want to use for the top of the doorway. If you make some windows on either side, the verticals of the windows need to be straight up and down, and the top and the bottom need to follow that diagonal. Okay, so they need to follow that diagonal. Anything that you do on this side of the house, because this side we've drawn flat, not in perspective, you can draw straight up and down or straight horizontal. Now, to make your house look more realistic, we've talked about in class, adding any details to the windows, adding frames around doors and windows, all of that makes a house look more realistic in your drawing. Adding any of those details makes it look more realistic. Okay, once you have your house drawn in perspective, the next thing we're going to do is start to create this stepped landscape. So we're going to start right here where the house, the front of the house is sitting. And we're going to put our house on a hill. Okay, we've talked about in class before the horizon line. The horizon line is the line that divides our picture from the sky and the ground. Where are we coloring or drawing sky, and where are we coloring and drawing ground? That's what the horizon line does. But when you look at this picture, this portion of our house right now is floating in the air, and that does not make sense. So we are going to add some more steps to our landscape, and don't forget to add them on both sides of the house. And now this line up here is going to be our horizon line. That's going to divide the sky from the ground. And I'm going to add another line down below, which is just another hill down in the front of the house. And then students had a choice if they wanted to add some scalloped lines for some shrubs or bushes. They were welcome to add in a tree if they wanted. Okay, any of those details were optional if students wanted to add that. Then using either markers Now don't use the Crayola markers if you're going to paint because they are washable and they will make the paint bleed with that color. But students decorated their picture and their landscape using different types of lines and shapes, repeating to create a pattern. So we know when lines and shapes are repeated, it creates a pattern. We learned about a new pattern, which we've talked about in some classes before in the past, but if you create some diagonal lines, so a straight line, but going on an angle like this, and then you create straight lines going in the opposite direction, you have now created a crosshatch pattern. And these can be used to create tiles on a kitchen floor or a pathway. And believe it or not, even Dr. Seuss, if you look at pictures of Cat in the Hat, he has used a crosshatch pattern quite often to show different types of fur. All right, and we filled in the rest. I'm just gonna quickly fill in some of mine. I'm not doing such a even job on repetition here, but just for time's sake, I'm gonna go rather fast, okay? So here I'm adding some vertical lines, which are straight up and down. And here I'll just add some horizontal, which are going left to right. Okay, and you could add zigzags, whatever styles you want. You can choose to color your house, or you can decorate your house with more patterns. Some students just colored in their house solid, and some students colored part of it solid and then part of it they did patterns. It's completely up to you how you want to decorate the house, following in the same sort of style as the rest of the picture. Okay, so here's an example of the finished house. Okay, then for the sky, if you wanted to add a sun, you could. I'm going to use a wide marker, and you have to watch where you put a line that you continue it on the other side of the house. Okay, so that it goes all the way through your picture. And I'm creating in a cool color, the blue, some large marks, exaggerated, showing sort of that starry night kind of style. My sun, I'm just gonna color in solid, but you once again could do a pattern on your sun using the exaggerated lines. Now, for students who wanted to paint, because I did this all with crayon, now like I said, if you do this with marker, it's not gonna work as well. You get your watercolor nice and saturated with the water, and if you paint over the crayon, you can see the crayon creates a resist, meaning the paint is not sticking to the crayon. So this is an option if you would like to paint. I know some of us really love painting, so this was an option if you wanted to finish off your project with a painting. And so here is an example of the finished project. This particular one did not have any painting at all, but I hope you have fun creating your Van Gogh inspired impressionist landscape. And if you do take time to create one, please send me a picture. I would love to see it. You can email it to me or post it on the Padlet. Have a great week. I'll see you next week.